Hilltoppers with a blitz. It's intercepted by Key, and Key has one man to beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key. What a start for Western Kentucky.
There goes Key. Splits the defenders and he's gone. 65 yards. He completes it with a somersault.
The handoff to Furby. Breaks through the defense. DeAndre Furby from 36 yards out. And Western Kentucky back up by 2 scores.
Riley's 2 yards in. Gonna bring it out. Oh! Riley's down. Riley's loose. And it's picked up. And it's returned for a touchdown by Marshall.
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach of WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the 6th consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome to the very first episode of the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, officially, though it is season 4 of our podcast overall. You may remember now that we have rebranded. The Shiner Sit Down has been retired, and we are now the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, creatively named. And as we kick off 2019, it's our first installment of position group breakdowns as we head closer and closer to week 1 games. So we're going to get you up to speed on each individual unit for the Herd and the Hilltoppers. Tonight, we're going to start with the defensive line units and the linebackers. And got to tell you, I'm feeling pretty good about both of these units for both of these teams. Think they're going to be real strengths for both of them, despite some big-time players that departed the program, exhausting eligibility or transferring or, whatnot. So we're going to get into that a little bit. We heavily lean upon our resident guru for most of our information. Of course, that's Phil Steele, and a lot of you guys do as well. So basically how this is going to work is I'm going to offer just some general info. We're going to talk projected starters as Mr. Steele sees them, though they may not actually be that way when week 1 rolls around. I'm going to talk about a few guys that you'll probably also see in the heavy rotation. And then we're just going to ask the fellas some questions, get some hot takes maybe. I'm going to let them give you their rundown on how they think the unit will perform and yada, yada, yada. So without further ado, let's just start right there in BGKY. We'll talk the defensive line for Western Kentucky to start off this brand new season of the brand new Moonshine Throwdown podcast. But before we do that, this is the same great group back again. Steven's going to handle the toppers. Tracy's going to handle the herd. You can find us. We're like everywhere now. The Moonshine Throwdown podcast is still on iTunes. It's on Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud. Everything will still be uploaded to the Shiner Sit Down YouTube channel for now, but you can also now get us on Spotify, and we just got added to Google Podcasts. So there is no excuse not to listen to the show. So, Steve, let's talk about the toppers and the defensive line. Phil still sees this unit as tied for 4th with basically the whole darn conference in Conference USA. Tied for 4th, Western Kentucky, along with FAU, Charlotte, Middle Tennessee, North Texas, Louisiana Tech, and UTSA. Going to call that a little bit of a cop-out by Phil, but that's okay. Tied for 4th, not too bad. 8 of the top 10 defensive linemen do return. So we'll talk about the key losses from the unit and who they got coming back, of course. So projected starters, Phil Steele, defensive end, Jawan Jones, 6'3", 270-pound sophomore, 42 tackles last year, 5 sacks and 7 starts. Nose tackle Jalen Madden, 6'1", 300-pound junior, 5 tackles in 9 games. Defensive tackle Jalen George, 6'3", 290-pound senior, 28 tackles, 6 tackles for loss and 10 starts. And defensive end D'Angelo Malone, 6'4", 235-pound sophomore, 60 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 11 starts in 2018 for the Toppers. Of those 4 guys, Phil still did his preseason all-conference team. Juwan Jones and D'Angelo Malone both land on the second team. So, Steven, talk to me about the biggest loss from the defensive line unit, and talk to me about these 4 guys in particular. Then we'll talk about some guys that you'll see in the heavy rotation after these 4.
Yeah, I mean, what Phil kind of ranked us as, 4 and like a 4-way tie there for 4th place. Our defensive line is going to be stout. There's a lot of depth there. 2 guys returning. D'Angelo Malone, that was a freshman All-American last year. Juwan Jones is a monster on the other end. We're gonna be stout up front, man. I don't want to make any huge predictions just yet, but this defensive line is gonna be one of the best in the conference, and we've got some monsters on both ends, some big guys up the middle, and some good guys that, when those guys need a blow, we got some guys that are going to come in and we're not going to drop off very much. So, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, I agree. This will be a big strength for the Western Kentucky defense this season. You said it. I mean, you got a freshman All-American returning, 2 on Phil Steele's preseason all-conference team on the edges, and a lot of talent behind those guys. I mean, got some continuity with the defensive coaches, so it's not like you're starting from scratch. I mean, everybody should be comfortable on that side of the ball, more so than on the offensive side of the ball, which we'll talk about in the weeks to come. So here's a few more guys that you'll probably see in heavy rotation. Defensive linemen, I'll give you 3. Defensive ends, I'll give you 3 more. There could also be a plethora of other players that you can see in and out. But, hey, man, we can't talk about every single guy on the roster because we got 4 units to talk about tonight. So let's talk 3 more defensive linemen. Jeremy Darvin, 6'1", 305-pound junior, couple of starts last year. I don't know if I'm saying this right, so you can tell me. Is it LeSean Terrell or LeSean Terrell? How do you pronounce that? LeSean Terrell. There you go. 6'1", 290-pound redshirt freshman. You could probably see in pretty decent rotation. And then defensive lineman, maybe Ricky Barber, 6'3", 275-pound freshman. That's a big kid right there on the defensive line. How about 3 more defensive ends? Carson Jordan, 6'2", 255-pound senior. 5 starts last year, 9 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Defensive end, CJ Maria, 6'4", 250-pound redshirt freshman. I remember a lot of toppers, a lot of fans really excited when this guy committed a couple years ago. Brings a lot of talent. Hopefully we get to see that on display this year. And then defensive end, I don't know if it's Devon or Devin Quincy, 6'1", 235-pound junior. So that's 6 more guys with not a huge drop-off in talent from number 1 to number basically 10. You got to like where you're sitting right now, especially if the injury bug doesn't just rear its ugly head. So we got a lot of talent coming back. So who are the biggest losses from the unit that you're going to have to replace production-wise, Steve?
Yeah, the biggest losses are, we had Julian Lewis last year. We had Evan Sainer. Both of those were big guys that have been around for 4+ years. And one more guy I touch on that you didn't mention, JUCO leader in sacks last year, Celestin Haba.
That's right.
Committed and is on campus and will be, scheduled right behind D'Angelo. So if somebody goes down with an injury or that guy needs a blow, he's gonna get some field time. I don't have any doubt that he's gonna see the field and he's gonna make an impact.
Yeah, now that you say that, I do see Mr. Haba listed here, and I don't know how I missed it, but I did miss it. So strike one on me. But anyway, so of those guys you mentioned, who is the toughest? Who will be the toughest to replace? And not to knock who just departed, but is replacing whoever you get ready to tell me was the toughest. Is that an improvement over last year? So we lost a guy, but who we got coming in is probably going to be better for the unit this year.
I think Julian Lewis is going to be the hardest to replace. 4-year guy, but he had a lot of experience. But I think the other guys that are going to step up and take his place, Madden and George, and the guys on the end, Jeremy Darvin, Ricky Barber, all those guys, they've started to see some reps. There's been a lot of injuries the last couple of years. So this unit has kind of gone, going back to, 14, has gone from a weakness to where we never put any pressure on the opposing team's quarterback to last year. We had a freshman All-American that I believe as a freshman had the most sacks among Conference USA freshmen. And then Juwan Jones on their other end that complimented him very well. So I think we're going to be fine. You hate to lose seniors that exhaust their eligibility, but I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah. And this is not a directed point at you, by the way, but I have read that and heard that so much today alone, talking about just not Western Kentucky's defensive line, but anywhere it's always like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. And yeah, I know, like, you're not going to be terrible. We know that, but to me, when you say, well, we'll be fine, that means, well, we'll be okay. And I think we're both in agreement that this is well beyond an okay unit for this team. This is one that can easily decide a game or two that may be the difference in a 6-6 or 7-5 year versus, a losing season. So I think it's more than fine. And I don't feel bad about that's not going out on a limb. I think you will be far more than fine. When the stats come in at the end of the year, this is probably a better than tied for fourth with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other schools unit. They might be legit their own, 4 by themselves or maybe a little higher. So who are you most excited to see in 2019 from this unit?
Well, it's D'Angelo Malone. I know he's been working hard all summer, grinding. I've seen workout videos of him, one-on-one training. I know he had a good spring ball. Hoping fall ball looks the same and come in and kind of just piggyback and grow on that freshman All-American status. He's not an unknown entity now. He's going to be somebody that the other teams might shade over and put a double team over there. And if that does, that's not a terrible thing. It might slow him down, but that's going to open up holes and lanes for somebody else too. So that's an impact. Whether he gets the stats or not, that's an impact. So I look forward to seeing what D'Angelo does. And I think he's going to have a big season. Even if statistically it's not huge, I think he's going to have a big impact on games.
Yeah, we used to talk about that a lot with other guys where they would they were responsible for plays that didn't necessarily show up in a stat line. And you've got 2 sophomores on the edges that are, like you just said, known entities. You're going to have to game plan for them now. You know what you're going to go up against. So it's a nice problem to have, or a nice problem to cause. Let's say that you now have some guys that you have to account for sure. How about your breakout player? Who's going to be the breakout player for the defensive line for the Tops in 2019?
Well, the breakout player is the guy I mentioned earlier. The JUCO leader in sacks last year is going to be Celestin Haba. Like I said, I think you're going to have trouble keeping him off the field. When he does get on the field, he's going to be rested. He's going to be running with his motor wide open, and he's going to be looking to take somebody's head off. So that guy is going to make an impact, and, we're going to find a way to get him on the field. I guarantee it.
Yeah, let's say that again for everybody that may not be paying close enough attention right now. Celestin Haba. That's a name that I can't believe I forgot it, because I completely remember him committing to the Tops and being the JUCO sack leader, and somehow it slipped my note taking. But yes, remember that name, Celestin Haba. Don't be surprised if he ends up on an all-conference team or maybe gets a newcomer type award or something like that. How about the potential MVP of the unit?
Well, put a lot of different names out here, but I'm going with Juwan Jones. My thinking being because of what I stated earlier, D'Angelo is going to be the guy getting the hype, getting the glory, the headliner. He's going to be the one getting double teamed. That other guy on the other end might see a weaker defender on the edge. And I think he's going to have him a good statistical season. And I think Juwan Jones is going to break out and have a great year as our MVP.
That's a good call. I mean, that's a good call. All right, look, you said about a few minutes ago that you weren't down with putting out any crazy predictions or anything like that, and that's fine. But we're going to do this, and it's on you to give me the info that you give me. But I'm going to ask you for a hot take for the unit, and I don't care what it is. It can be about one particular player or the unit as a whole. I don't care, but I need a hot take for the Western Kentucky defensive line unit for 2019.
All right, here it is. As I'm looking at the conference stats last year, I think the top 8 sack leaders either left, graduated, or transferred. Top 8 going. I think one of our guys, one of the 3 that we've talked about mainly there, I think one of those 3 finishes in the top 2 to 3 in the sacks for the conference for the year.
Okay.
I don't know which one, Juwan, D'Angelo, maybe Celestin getting in there doing some cleanup duty, but I think one of those guys, and even the unit as a whole, I think will be near the top of the league in sacks.
So when you say near the top of the league, are you talking about top third?
Top 2 or 3 teams.
Oh, okay. So he's thinking top 2 sack team as a defensive line unit, put it that way. Man, that's a pretty hot take. I mean, we know they're going to be a strong unit, but if they stay healthy, and even if they lose a guy or two to injury, the depth seems like it's there on paper. Of course, you still have to execute. So, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Top 2 in the conference in sacks. I like it. That's a hot take, Trace. I hope you're ready.
I'm prepped. I'm ready.
So we're gonna give Steve a breather real quick. He's gonna wet his whistle with a cold drink and get ready to talk linebackers in a minute. But in the meantime, we're gonna shift to the other side of this rivalry, and Trace is gonna talk about the Marshall defensive line. And another strength for this team again. Marshall defensive line ranked by Phil Steele as the bona fide, all by yourself, number 1 unit in Conference USA. Let me put a star beside that. That takes into account that recently transferred first-team all-conference defensive end Ty Tyler would be on the roster. But I still think the Herd still has a top 1, 2, maybe 3 defensive line without Ty Tyler. And along with that, he had the Herd defensive line unit ranked at number 21 nationally. Those are some pretty strong accolades from the outset. Now, I'm going to let you talk about some key losses here in a minute. I think anybody who's familiar with Herd football can name at least a couple of those guys right off the rip. So, but I'm going to talk about projected starters. Defensive end, Marquise Couch, 6'1", 249-pound senior, 41 tackles last year, 8 tackles for loss in 8 starts. Nose tackle, Channing Hames, the name you better know by now if you don't know if you're a Herd fan. 6'5", 268-pound senior, 45 tackles last year, 7.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss in 3 starts, but he appeared in just about every game. Defensive lineman Elias Carpenter, 6'3", 280-pound junior, and defensive end Kobe Cumberlander, 6'3", 241-pound sophomore, 6 tackles in 5 games last year. So, Trace, let's talk about the unit, those 4 guys. Give me those key losses, and then we'll talk about some guys that you might see in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was a little surprised when you read off those numbers of what Phil Steele had them. I mean, being first in Conference USA is not that big of a stretch because, I mean, they're always usually in that category. That's one of the best strengths that Doc has is he always is really good at building depth at certain positions. And the defensive line is always one of those positions that he always has depth at. So, but like you said, I mean, him picking them first in the conference for the D-line has a lot to do with Ty Tyler's projected return. But now that he's gone, but like now that he's gone, they're probably not going to be number one projected, but they're still top 3 for sure, without no doubt about it. But I mean, they're losing some guys. I mean, obviously there's about 3 really big losses. I mean, Tyler now, Ryan B, Juwan Young, Malik Thompson, all those guys are pretty significant players. They're all gone. So like this is the front 7 in general is something I was really kind of focusing on. I'm not really worried, but just curious as to what they were going to do with some of the the losses that they had from last year and stuff. So, I mean, D-line, I still think it's solid, obviously. I think it's going to be one of the best in the conference. It's going to be another strength of the team. Marshall's been the last couple of years, they've been really good in sacks. They've been really good in just, quarterback hurries and pressure and stopping the run and all that good stuff. So I think a lot of that will continue. Focus on a few more players here shortly, but like I'm pretty excited for the unit. I mean, 21st in the country. I don't know. Personally, I don't think I'd probably put it that high, but like I mean, that's a pretty big testament to what he thinks the line will be, and he knows that that's always a strength of the herd. So I think it'll be a strength again.
Well, let me just give you some teams that he has Marshall rated higher than above on the defensive line. Oklahoma, Boise State, Washington, Oregon, Iowa, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. I mean, we're getting Texas.
Big boys.
Yeah, Texas. We're getting down the line here. I mean, there's some pretty big names on this list that are pretty far down. But still, 21 is pretty legit. So even if you take away the Ty Tyler defensive end, and you knock Marshall down maybe second in the league. Okay, the next, Southern Miss is listed by Phil Steele as the number 43 defensive line in the country. So it's not like they're going to go from 21 to 90. There's still a lot of talent there. No question about it. The loss of Ty Tyler is big. You just don't lose your leading sack man, first team all conference player, and it not sting. But a lot of folks seem to think that the talent is on the roster to fill that hole. And with the right shifting, which some things we're going to talk about here in a little bit, they might find the right combination that's even more athletic and a little bit better on a unit that had 42 sacks last year. I doubt many fans know they had 42 sacks as a unit last year. All right, so let's talk about a few other names that you might see in the rotation. How about defensive line? Milan Lanier, 6'5", 263-pound senior, 6 tackles in 9 games. Defensive lineman Jermaine Cross, 6'5", 289-pound redshirt freshman. Now defensive end, transfer in from FIU, Fermin Silva, much talked about by us on the show, was a force at FIU 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but last year was injured, only appeared in like 3 or 4 games. So if he's back to 100%, look out. He may very well be a day one starter for the herd. And if not, I'd say he's quickly going to be introduced into the rotation. Defensive end Eric McDuffie, 6'5", 269-pound redshirt freshman. Another guy that I remember on signing day, Herd fans were really excited that they managed to get Eric McDuffie. So kind of excited to see him on the field. A couple more guys. How about defensive lineman Kyron Taylor? His name sound familiar? Maybe not on the defensive line, but pretty sure he moved over from the offensive line this offseason. 6'2", 307-pound sophomore. Like to see how that kind of turns out. These experiments seem to work for Doc Holliday. I don't know how it works, but it seems to work. Credit him with Devin Johnson and moving Ryan B from the outside to the inside and any number of other position changes that have seemed to work for Doc. And then one more, how about a hometown kid? How about defensive end Owen Porter, 6'2", 242-pound redshirt freshman? I think he came out of Spring Valley. So, thoughts on this, I don't know if you want to call it a 2 deep, 3 deep rotation, whatever you want to call it. There's about 10 guys there I named. Thoughts on the overall unit, Trace?
Yeah, I mean how Phil still has him rated right now as far as the starters. I mean that's pretty accurate, I would say. I mean obviously Ty Tyler's not going to start, but like we were talking about it pre-show, they could even slide one of the linebackers down to the D end, and like we mentioned maybe Darius Hodge, which we'll mention him a lot more later, but they can maybe slide him down there. I mean they have pretty good success obviously with doing kind of stuff like that. So I think I don't think they're going to have much to worry about. I mean, they always, like I said, and it's like you just said, how he always manages to find success with switching players' position and so forth. I think that's because the quality of players he recruits, and I think that's because of the depth that they always have. And I think that's a big testament to that. I mean, their depth's really impressive. I mean, that's a sign that you have a good program when you have guys that can just constantly come in, guys get hurt, guys transfer, guys, whatever. Guys come in and pick up the slack. So I think that's a testament right there, big one for Doc. And I think that this line, I mean, it definitely has it's not as solidified as it was last year because we mentioned 3 or 4 names there that were pretty significant players, but it's far from bare of a cupboard. They're going to have a lot of options there. So I'm going to be interesting to see what the rotations look like, who comes in, what guys come in and make plays that you didn't expect to. So I'm intrigued for sure.
Yeah. One thing I've got to mention is just like I did for the Tops, mentioning the Phil Steele preseason all conference team. And as far as I can't get a gauge on how Ty Tyler was figured into this because he's listed as a starter on the roster in that section of the book, but he wasn't on any of the first, second, third, or fourth team preseason team by Phil Steele. And in the write-up of the unit, he mentions that he's in the portal but could return. And now we know that he didn't return. So I just don't know how heavily the Tyler being there or not being there weighed into these rankings. But one name that did appear was Channing Hames, landed on the first team all-conference preseason team for Phil Steele. So one to take note of. Channing Hames is an absolute force. I mean, the stat line lets you know that he does show up way more than just in a bowl game. He just happens to take over a bowl game when he plays in them. All right. Excuse me. So who is the toughest player to replace along this defensive line unit? That's a tough one.
Yeah. Toughest I'd probably say is Ryan B, just because he was there for so long, 4-year starter. A guy that really produced a lot for the Herd over the last few years. And, he was a really big reason that the defenses have had so much success over the last few years. He's just a great player, a force inside. I mean, 6'7", 6'8", whatever he is. I mean, that's just a tough guy to block, tough guy to try to stop. I mean, he was just a beast. So I think he'd probably be the toughest guy to replace. But I mean, honestly, you could make the case for Ty Tyler just because they're a little bit thin maybe on the defensive end right now until the season gets going. So that might be one you can mention too. I mean, you can make the argument, but I'd say Ryan B just because he was a 4-year starter, a 4-year legit all-conference first, second team guy.
Yeah. And I mean, outside of an astounding individual effort in last year's Moonshine Throwdown to get that sack fumble on Stephen Duncan, for all intents and purposes, the Toppers are going in to win that game with basically under a minute to go. So it just speaks to the level of intensity and the type of plays that a guy like Ryan B can make when you really, really need one. So who are you most excited to see from the defensive line unit in 2019, Trace?
Probably Channing Hames. I mean, to see him now as a senior, where he's going to be for sure starter. The last couple of years he's been a really big impact player, but he hasn't started a lot necessarily. So now that he's going to be a no doubt starter, I'm really excited to see what he does. I have my hot take, which you're going to ask later. My hot take involves him actually. So I think spoiler, but no, he's going to be awesome to watch. I mean, if he stays healthy, he could really be a bona fide, no doubt first team all conference guy. I can't wait to see what he does as a senior.
Okay. So a lot of change on this defensive line. So who's going to be the breakout player on this unit?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Furman Silva for that, the FIU transfer. I really am looking forward to him too. I mean, I almost said him a minute ago, but I'm looking forward to him as a breakout guy. I think he's going to be a big time addition to that D line. Obviously he was a second team all-conference guy at FIU a couple years ago, so that shows he's got a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and he's going to be a really welcomed addition to the DN. So, like I said a minute ago, they're maybe a little bit thin on the DN heading into the season. He's going to be a big-time addition, I think. I mean, he has all the makings of being, if he's healthy and if he's back to his old self, so to speak, he's going to be a big-time player, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I would say he'd probably be the guy that I would say will break out probably more than anybody else as far as the unknown. So I'll go with Silva.
Okay. Well, do I even need to ask who's your MVP for the defensive line?
It's Channing Haynes, my man. It's Channing Haynes.
I think you've got an affinity for Channing Haynes this season.
Might be.
Yeah, I'm feeling like you're thinking he's going to be a big time player in the conference.
It's almost like he's decent or something. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
All right, it's hot take time. You gave us a tease, so let's see what Channing Haynes is going to do in 2019.
Channing Haynes is going to lead Conference USA in sacks.
Ooh.
You better
from the
save
defensive lineman position.
Yes, you save it in your iPhone notes right now. He is going to lead the league in sacks if he's healthy the whole year. It's happening. That's my hot take. It's sizzling. Channing Haynes, sack leader.
You got that. A defensive tackle, nose tackle, is going to lead the Conference USA in sacks for 2019.
10 plus.
10 plus.
Close to 15.
Man, he's digging. The take is getting hotter and hotter and hotter.
I'm going to look like a fool here in a few minutes.
Man, if that's not motivation, I don't know what is. Channing, if you're listening, Trace believes in you.
I absolutely do.
All right, so hang with us on the other side of this break. We're talking linebackers. Some guys you're going to really want to get to know. A lot of playmakers on both sides of this rivalry. Again, stick with us. It is the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.
3rd and 10 for Purdue. Appleby with some time over the middle. Picked up by Lang. Second interception of the game. Lang. Taquan Lang. To the end zone. Touchdown. What a day for Taquan Lang. 17 tackles, 2 pick sixes. And that one may have just iced it for his team.
All right, we're back. It's time to talk linebackers. We're getting to the second level now. Somebody has, I don't know how, managed to bust through the defensive line, and now they're going to stare down some of these dudes in the face. So let's talk Hilltopper linebackers, Steven. Phil Steele ranks them as the number 12 unit in Conference USA. Ouch. And I have to think that has to do mainly with the key losses. It's a lot of production that's gone. So you really have no other conclusion to draw than, man, that's a lot gone. That's going to be a lot to replace. So let's talk about some preseason starters. You give me the losses, just like before. Phil still projects, like 2 linebackers and a nickelback. So I see Coco Darden more as a defensive back, but Phil lumps him in with the linebackers. So that's what we're going to go with today. Clay Davis, 6'2", 225-pound junior. Kyle Bailey, a 6', 220-pound junior, 29 tackles and 1 start last year. And then third team on the preseason Phil Steele all-conference team, Coco Darden, 5'9", 190-pound senior, 71 tackles last year, 11 pass breakups, 3 picks, and 11 starts. All right. We know a little bit about these Hilltopper linebackers. Your average fan probably knows more so what's missing than what's there. So let's talk about those 3 guys in particular and tell me, those key losses. Let's reiterate those once again.
Yeah, I mean, 2 big losses. One 4-year graduate, exhausted his eligibility. The other one transferred to Purdue. So between Messiah White and Ben Holt, you've lost 192 tackles, 6.5 sacks, and 11 tackles for loss last year.
Wow.
So, the ranking of number 12, I'm not offended by it, not at all. There's question marks there, and there's reason to be concerned. And I think I said in our last episode that that's probably our biggest question mark and our most, it's going to be our weakest position on paper. Sure, there's opportunity. There's a lot of, there's a big position battle there for who's going to start and play and see the most snaps. And quite frankly, somebody's going to play a lot of downs and pick up those two guys' slack. But, those guys have a nose for the ball. You couldn't stop Ben Holt from hitting somebody with the ball. So do we have that next man up? I hope we do. But the preseason ranking is about right. And with those big losses, and we've got some guys that hopefully are ready to step up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. Almost 200 tackles. Whew, that's a lot of production. I don't care how you slice it. 200 tackles between two guys especially is freaking crazy. There are a lot of, Phil projects starters here, but to me, it seems like it's very much an influx type thing. And it's, you might go until right before game time until we figure out who's going where. And there's nothing wrong with that when you've got a lot of concern in a unit. So let's talk about a few other guys, some new guys to the program, some guys that have played before, and, some guys that may be looking to seize their moment. Of course, we know Eli Brown, 6'2", 220-pound senior, 25 tackles last year, 5.5 tackles for loss in 11 games. Dealing with a little bit of a foot injury? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's something to keep an eye on. We don't really know how Eli's going to be, when he'll be available, and if he is available, when he'll really be at 100%. So, hoping for a speedy recovery for Eli. And then transfer we talked about just the other day when we were bringing everybody back up to speed was Malik Staples, 6'1", 225-pound redshirt senior. Another guy to pay attention. Two guys. I'll give you two more guys. Steven might talk about a few more guys, but I'm going to talk about two more. Demetrius Kane, 6', 240-pound junior. And then a local legendary hero, fan favorite already, Rex Henderson, 6'1", 223-pound sophomore, 3 tackles in 12 games last year. So, cupboard's not bare. It's just the guys have to establish themselves. That's what I'm going to say. So, Steve, let's talk about those guys and anybody else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I really think, D. Kane that you mentioned, I think he's going to have a chance to step up, make a big impact. Kyle Bailey, if I'm not mistaken, he was a converted safety or cornerback. He was in the secondary, recruited him. So we've bulked him up and moved him down to the linebacker. Then we also have Damon Lowe that sat out last year. He was a transfer from EKU. Hoping he can come in, make an impact. Like you said, Eli Brown, injured, foot injury. Haven't really heard any update on how serious that is or when he might come back. And then you mentioned Rex Henderson from Butler County. Made some special teams plays last year. And the coaching staff has been on record and quoted as saying, he has all conference talent before he's said and done. Maybe not year 2, but he's a big body. He's athletic. He was a high school quarterback, and was a big bruising player. But hopefully he can fit in and find some playing time, make some more plays. And then of course Malik Staples from U of L was recruited there as a running back. Traded to a linebacker for his last year there with the program. He doesn't have a lot of starts, a lot of game time under his belt in that position. But I think somebody of his size and his athleticism, just watching game tape on him, period, I think he could easily come in and kind of be that surprise guy and make an impact and hopefully fill a hole that has been vacated by the other two guys that left.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we know for sure about everybody that I mentioned is you have a known entity in Coco Darden, without a doubt. You know what he's all about, and you know what he's going to give you. And like I said, I personally think of him more in the secondary, but Phil puts him here with the linebackers and whatnot. So whatever. Everything else is kind of, it seems just like a race to see who can separate the most before week 1 and who fits into what they're trying to do and who's getting the knack of everything. And, it's just something I guess we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out. So, 12 doesn't offend me either. And I'm right there with you. It's hard to say, well, we lost 200 tackles between 2 guys and all these other stats, but we'll be fine. And I don't mean that I'm not saying that because you said that before. It's just hard to say that. You have to legitimately look inside and go, all right, we're going to have to do some things here that we didn't have to do in years past. So how about the toughest? I mean, you had two studs. So who's the toughest to replace? Is it Ben Holt and his knack for the ball and those extra few tackles, or is it the little bit more athletic Masai White? Who's the tougher to replace?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably Ben Holt. I mean, 116 tackles. I think it was almost 10 tackles a game. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's a big hole to fill. He just always, every time a running back was getting dragged down, it was usually 44 holding on to his ankles, tackling. So that guy was everywhere. He was a coach's son, just lived in the weight room, lived on the field, earned his scholarship the hard way. And, obviously deserved all the success that he's had, and good for him going to Purdue and playing that last year with his father. So that's definitely the big body to replace. And, that one will hurt a little bit. Hopefully somebody's ready to step up.
Yeah, I hope so too. But that's tough. I think it was, you said close to 10 tackles a game. You're right on. I can't remember. I really think that it was
9.7.
9.7. I was thinking it was 9.4 or 9.7. So, 9.7 tackles per game. Dude, that doesn't happen by accident. You know what I mean? I mean, not game in and game out. Jeez. So who are you most excited to see in 2019 amongst this group?
Well, I think it's going to be a transfer. Damon Lowe. I think he's sat out. He went to EKU, smaller school in Kentucky, transferred, came to Western, has sat out a season. Sometimes sitting out can be kind of the best experience for a kid, for anybody. You kind of see the game from a different angle. You watch how other people, other seniors, other leaders operate. You get in the weight room, you bulk up, you work on your craft. And I think he's going to have a chance to come in and shine, and I think he's ready to do it.
Well, and I don't know that he needed it, but hey, a year off gives you a chance to get healthy for sure. But you mentioned Damon Lowe, 6'1", 240-pound junior, for you guys keeping track of those measurables. How about the breakout player? Who's the breakout player this year?
Well, I think the breakout player is going to be the converted safety. I think it's going to be Kyle Bailey.
Okay.
He's athletic. He's got some good speed on him. They definitely have bulked him up if they were going to move him down to the linebacking position. So I think he's going to have a chance to make some plays, and hopefully he has that knack to finding the ball and kind of helps off some of those tackles that have departed to graduation and transfer.
Yeah, I'm with you. How about a potential MVP for the Hilltopper linebackers 2019?
Yeah, that one's hard. I'd love to give it to Eli Brown if I knew he was healthy and was going to be there, game 1 through 12. But without knowing when he's going to be back or how much he's going to be back when he is back, how slow he's going to be, how fast he gets back up to speed. So I'm going to go with Damon Lowe. I think there's just a wide open, competition at linebacker. It could be any number of guys. It could be somebody we haven't named. For all we know. But I think he's going to get a chance because he does have playing experience at EKU. I think he's going to have a chance to come in and prove himself and get on the field. So that's my guy.
Yeah, that's not a bad choice. I mean, Could be. Okay, here's the tough one. Well, maybe it doesn't have to be that tough. Expectations are not through the roof high for this unit. So what is your hot take for the Western Kentucky linebackers in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think there's going to be a drop-off from last year. But I really think our defense is going to be another strength of our team this year. I think we'll be heavier on the defensive side than we are on the offensive side, and the continuity with Clayton White. I think we might have, a hot take is we might have two linebackers that combine to almost give you, I'm not going to say give it to you, not 192, but they're going to get us close to that tackle range that those two departing guys gave us.
I mean, 150 fair?
Yeah, give me 150, 160.
Okay.
Yeah.
So two top tackling linebackers can top the combined 150 tackle mark. That's pretty legit. I mean, what else? What do you want? I mean, okay. I mean, I'm still excited to see, these linebackers are kind of, literally and, in for the purposes of this podcast, they're sandwiched between two legitimate strengths on this defense, defensive line and the secondary, which we'll talk about in whatever week we talk about the secondary. But I'm excited to see how they fit in and how the play of the other two units goes hand in hand with what these linebackers need to do and are able to do. So something to keep an eye on for Hilltopper football in 2019. So, all right, we're up to speed on the front seven for the tops. A lot of names, a lot of stats, a lot of measurables. You've gotten some potential stars, some breakout players who might be the MVP, and Steven's giving you a few hot takes. Take it all in and digest it, because it won't be too much longer before you're going to get. What is our next episode? Is it the defensive backs? Is that the next episode? I don't even know.
Sounds right, but I don't know.
Okay, so next week we'll be talking about the defensive backs, and you'll get to have the entire defensive unit. Like, you'll be brought up to speed with that. So right now we're going to switch gears. We're going to go back to Trace. We're going to talk about these herd linebackers, and then we're going to get the heck out of here for this week. So Trace, let's talk Marshall linebackers, man. Phil still ranks the unit as number 3 in the conference. Several key losses. So I'm going to talk about projected starters real quick. Fan favorite, guy that has been biding his time, waiting for his time to shine. 2019 could be his year. And of course, yes, I'm talking about Jaquan Yulee, the 6'1", 250 pound junior, 27 tackles last year and appeared in all 13 games. Former high school teammate of Jaquan Yulee, Virginia Tech transfer, set out last year, Tavante Beckett, 5'10", 222 pound junior, and Omari Cobb, who seems like he's been there for like 8 years now, but he was a really, really good, productive player for the Herd as a freshman, and then kind of got lost in the depth chart with the emergence of other players. And, he was still in the heavy rotation, but now he's back in the starting lineup as a senior, 6'4", 226 pounder, 61 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss last year for Omari Cobb. And he lands on Phil Steele's third team preseason all-conference team. So let's talk about those three guys and the major key losses before we start talking about some rotational players.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I'm more sold on the linebackers right now than I am the D-line. Even though the linebackers lose three starters, basically, I still feel really good about this unit. I love the depth that they have. There's a lot of guys like, Yulee and Cobb, two in particular, that have shown flashes of being really good players. It's just they haven't necessarily always been in the picture as far as starting goes. But now that those other three guys are gone, Artis Johnson, Chase Hancock, Frankie Hernandez, they're gone. So these two are going to be leaned on heavily, and I really think it's going to pay big dividends for not only the defense, but those, obviously those players in general. I think they're going to have huge years. I'm looking forward to seeing some of this depth emerge, some of these unknown guys, I know they're going to step up because they always have. There's always a reason to play more guys, whether it's injury or whether it's guys struggling or whatever. So I'm really looking forward to the linebacking unit. I mean, I think top 3 in the league's fair. Even though they do lose 3 starters, I think that's definitely fair because this unit has a lot of talent. And I'll kind of maybe I'll focus a little bit more on that here shortly. But yeah, I think this unit's going to be pretty good, I think.
Which is, I mean, this is the total opposite for what we just talked about with Western. We talked about Western lost a lot of production, 2 major guys, almost 200 tackles between the 2 of them. And yet Phil still ranks that unit coming into 2019 at number 12 in the conference. The Herd loses all 3 of their starting linebackers and several hundred tackles amongst the 3. And they come in and he ranks them number 3 in the conference again. So that speaks to the depth. It speaks to the talent that's on the roster. And I mean, I don't know what else it speaks to. There is a lot of returning production that he gets to base that off of. So, I mean, that's pretty astonishing, though, that you have a similar situations for both teams and the rankings are just so much different. So let's talk about a couple of other names that you're going to hear. I'll name off 4 guys. If I miss one that you have, please, let's talk about him. We've already talked about him several times, and that's Darius Hodge. He came up huge for the Herd in the bowl game, the Gasparilla Bowl. 6'2", 247-pound sophomore, 13 tackles in 11 games last year. Now, we did mention that we may see him slide down into a defensive end role, kind of a hybrid type player, very athletic, seems to be able to be an edge rusher to a little bit. So we'll see how that plays out. How about Breon Hayward, 6'2", 227-pound junior. Tyler Brown, 6'2", 211-pound senior, and Tyler Lichter, 6'1", 227-pound junior. A lot of guys there that you might hear coming off the bench quickly. Trace, do you have anybody else that you've been hearing that I might have missed that we could also see hitting that rotation fairly heavily?
Honestly, not really. I mean, I feel like those guys you hit there are pretty much guys that you can keep in the back of your mind, not necessarily guys to go out of your way to think, oh, they're going to, be the breakout player of the defense or anything. I don't know if they're going to be in that level, but I feel like they're guys that you definitely need to remember, keep in the back of your mind. As a linebacker or 2 go down, maybe with an injury here and there, miss a couple games, some guys are going to kind of come in there and pick up the slack. So I feel like some of those guys you said could be that. So yeah, I mean, outside of those, there's really not anybody else that I really feel like that is not that they're not worth mentioning, but guys that won't necessarily make a big deal right off the bat, big impact. So that's kind of where I am with that.
You're not feeling like that there's another must know like before week 1, right? There are some guys that you might know as the season goes along.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've covered all of our bases right now.
Pretty much. That's where
Okay, fair enough. Just wanted to I've missed several big names throughout this episode, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't do it again. I might be 2,
so I don't know. I might be 2.
Okay, so who's the toughest to replace off of this linebacker core from a year ago? And this has got to be the hardest question maybe that I'm going to ask you today. 3 very productive players gone. Of course, 1 all-timer. Some people might consider 2, but, who's the toughest to replace?
Yeah, I think the toughest to replace is Chase Hancock, just because the last couple of years he's led Marshall in tackles, 100 plus 2 straight years. I mean, the guy is just an absolute workhorse, just a great player, great story. As a West Virginia guy that could have went to a smaller, D2 school and got a scholarship, instead decided to walk on at Marshall and became a superstar. So I feel like Chase Hancock's the guy that's going to be the hardest to replace, just based on his tenacity and leadership and just the pure production that he brought to that linebacking unit. So I think Chase Hancock's probably the hardest guy to replace, but I mean, Arteith Johnson and Frankie Hernandez both were key contributors. So, but Hancock's probably the guy, just because, I mean, when you lead a team in tackles to that extent, that's a big time stat there. So,
and I've got to, I mean, it's just another storyline. This is like Ben Holt and Chase Hancock, both walk-ons, both earning their way up, climbing the ranks, earning the scholarship, both incredibly productive players. and then leaving at the same time. I mean, Hancock exhausts his eligibility. Of course, Holt graduates and wants to exhaust his eligibility playing for his father up at Purdue. But, I mean, these guys their careers paralleled one another at these two schools at any number of intervals. It's kind of wild. So who are you most excited to see in 2019?
I'm most excited to see Jaquan Yulee because I've been waiting so long to see him fully unleashed. You know, the last couple of years we've seen enough for him to know that he's legit. But, like, now that he's probably going to be a starter for every single game, barring any unforeseen circumstance, I think it's going to be off the charts how good he is this year. I mean, this guy, I feel like, honestly, he's got the kind of talent to where he could be considered the most talented defensive player in Conference USA. I mean, he's that kind of talent, a guy that was going to Alabama. He was going to play for Alabama. So that means that he's big time, just based on pure talent alone, measurables, all that stuff. So I can't wait to see Yulee this year as a starting linebacker. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, in limited linebacking action, yes, but in special teams, he has gone crazy the past 2 years. I mean, numerous forced fumbles, numerous huge hits. I mean, turning the tide of games literally on his own by making a special teams play or two here and there. So, yeah, cutting him loose is going to be something to see, barring injury. This should be a very special season for that young man. How about a breakout player? I mean, I don't know that you can consider Yulee a breakout player because he's been breaking out, but is Yulee your breakout player?
No, he's not, but like I guess he could technically fit the role, but I went with Darius Hodge.
Good call.
You know, because he's like, honestly, last year before the bowl game, I really didn't notice him very much at all. You know, he kind of had a limited playing time, but in that bowl game, he absolutely stepped up majorly. Like, he was probably, you could argue he was the best defensive player Marshall had in that bowl game last year. You could argue that he was the best, you know, guy they had out there. He was big time in that bowl game, and that's really exciting. You know, it's kind of like the same thing with Channing Hames in the 2017 New Mexico Bowl. Like, that was really his coming out party in a lot of ways. So I feel like Hodge, that could be his coming out party, the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl. I think he's going to have a big year. You know, we mentioned that he could move down to the defensive line, defensive end there. You know, we mentioned it's possible. I mean, I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but like, if he stays at linebacker, he's going to have a big year, I think. So I'm going with Darius Hodge at the breakout. That's a
good choice. Potential MVP for the linebacker core 2019.
I'm rolling with Amari Cobb. You know, I think he's going to have a Chase Hancock type of year. Not that he's going to go out and get 120 tackles, but I think he is going to have a big year. Going to be a really productive guy. You know, for a pretty high pick on the all-conference team, perhaps. You know, second team, maybe creep up to first team. Who knows? I think Cobb's really talented. He's been a really kind of unsung hero for the last few years for the Herd defensively. And you know, and probably special teams too, if I look back at it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Cobb this year. I think he's going to be really good. He's going to be unleashed now more than he probably ever has before. So I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, I mean, 6'4", 226 pounds. It's a pretty big guy. And I recall him particularly in the FIU game last year. He gets a pick six, so he's got the ability to make the interception, bring it in, and then go the distance the other way. So a little added piece, a little added weapon to the Amari Cobb repertoire. Yeah, exciting to see him play. I hope he stays healthy all year. He'll be a fun player to watch. Give me a hot take for the linebackers of 2019 for the Herd.
Well, my hot take for this one is, which I don't think it's necessarily that hot, but like it kind of is just because he hasn't always played the most. But I think Amari Cobb is going to lead Marshall in tackles this year. I think he's going to be – he could honestly approach 100. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to get 100 for sure. I mean, that'd be a really hot take there, I guess. But I think he's going to lead the Herd in tackles. You know, look, the last couple of years, Chase Hancock's done the same thing. So the linebacking unit has been very susceptible to leading the team in tackles. Now, maybe it was just because Hancock was a great player, obviously. But, I mean, that position I feel like is you know, conducive for a high tackle season. So I feel like Cobb is going to lead them in tackles. He could be one of the top, you know, 5 or so guys in the conference in terms of tackles. So I really think he's going to have a good year for that. So I'm going to go with Amari Cobb leading the herd in tackles.
Well, let me give you a data point maybe that will help solidify that hot take. And that's the fact that 90-plus tackle Malik Gant is no longer on this herd defense. And we all know how close he played to the line of scrimmage. So I don't know that Marshall's got another defensive back or a safety that can play like that up close to the line of scrimmage. So that tells me that potentially these linebackers are going to have to make a few more plays here and there. So that could help you get Amari Cobb to that 100 tackle mark. But anyway, dude, solid information, guys. A lot of killer information for both sides here. Great way to start off the brand new Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We're going to get the heck out of here on some final thoughts for the defensive linemen, the linebackers, and whatever the heck these guys want to say. So getting late in the evening. So I'm gonna let Steve take us out, and then Trace can finish it up, and we'll get the heck out of here. So how about some final thoughts, Steve? Let's do this.
Yeah, just excited to see what these two position groups bring to the table. Like you said earlier, the linebackers are kind of in between the strength of the D line and the secondary, which is going to be really stout for us. So I think that'll help kind of soften the blow of some losses and hopefully kind of cover up. What may be a weakness for us in the middle, but I think we're still going to have a solid defense. I think we're going to win more than 3 games, and I think the defense is going to have a big part in that happening. So really excited, a lot of new names and fresh faces and guys ready to prove their worth and ready to show out on the field. We're just, a couple months away, so let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Let's play some freaking football. Trace? Final thoughts?
Well, first point, I'm going to say let's play some football. I agree. Retweet 100%. But as far as Marshall, the front seven, I've said it in a recent episode that I think that there's some question marks there, obviously, with the front seven. But at the same time, I'm really not worried, overly, concerned about it, because I feel like, as I've said this episode, as you said, they have a lot of depth in the front seven. So I don't feel like they're going to be struggling that much, obviously. But the front seven is going to be really big reason, or big, whatever you want to call it, that they have success defensively. Because if you look at the last few years, basically 2013 onwards, besides 2016, every year 2013 onwards, they've had one of the better defenses in Conference USA. It's pretty much been top 4, top 3. One of the top scoring defenses and all that. And the front seven is really key to that, because the secondary, I feel like Marshall, we'll get into that more later, obviously, in other episodes, but I feel like Marshall's never necessarily, the last few years, they really haven't had a truly, lockdown corner, like a guy that can just shut you down at will. I don't think they really have ever had that. So they've had to, at least recently. So I feel like they've kind of needed to lean on the front seven a lot more. I think the same will be said this year. But I think the corners and the safeties and the secondary in general was going to be good as a little preview. But I feel like this front seven is going to be really crucial. So hopefully those guys can step up and replace some of those big-time losses that they had from last year. So I'm looking forward to it. Inject it in my veins. Football, let's go right now.
Oh, my God. I would have to say first name that comes to mind of a lockdown, Marshall's last lockdown corner would have to be Darryl Roberts.
It's swag for sure, yeah.
And that was long enough ago now that it's time to get another.
Yep.
That's just how that is. All right. So all I'm going to say is it is freaking awesome to be back behind the microphone on a consistent basis again. I never really remember how much I miss doing the show until we start doing a brand new season again. And, we start talking about the new names and the new faces and the excitement around the programs and we build and build and build towards week 1. The only other thing I'm going to say is make sure you are subscribing to the podcast on whatever station or platform you're listening to it on, because you're not going to want to miss any of these episodes. We've got next week we'll be doing the secondary, which means, of course, corners and safeties. it's its own episode. We won't have another combo episode again, and if you want to call it that, until we talk wide receivers / tight ends. So from here on out, everybody's going to have their own type or their own breakdown by position group. So make sure you're subscribing. Again, we're on everywhere you can find a freaking podcast. If you're not listening to Spotify or, iTunes or something like that, then, I don't know where you're listening to them. We're everywhere. We've tried to be very, very accessible. Do not want to miss those. So guys, it's awesome info. Glad we were able to put this together tonight. So let's get the heck out of here. Steve, get us, Steve, get us out of here with a go Tops, please.
Go Tops.
Trace.
Go Herd.
We will see you next week talking about the secondary. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We're out.